Yo guys, what's going on? My name is HackingIsFreedom and welcome to a very special episode of What Was Cut. Can you believe it's been a whole year already? Today we're going to be talking about some of my favorite things that were cut, some things I found interesting, as well as some other things I just found cool in all 33 episodes of What Was Cut. It was actually pretty hard to select some of my favorites, as all of it's really cool and interesting, but I tried to keep them short. I'm also not going to be going in numerical order, so everything will be random. Anyway, kick back, relax, and enjoy. So, we're obviously going to start off with the first episode I uploaded, which was The Simpsons Hit and Run. It was my all-time favorite game as a kid, so I felt like it was fitting for the first episode. The main thing that really intrigued me was the Audi TT, mainly because it's a real-life car and because of its size. It's much smaller than a majority of the cars in the game, and still to this day, nobody knows what it was used for. I also found this test map pretty interesting because if it's not for the racing minigames, I have absolutely no clue what it was used for. Next, we're going to jump to episode 4, which was Call of Duty World at War. I personally love seeing early maps, from any Call of Duty really. All of these designs look so interesting, and I hope one day there's a build that gets leaked that has some of these early maps available. As of right now, I think only one of these maps featured here is actually in an early build. Treyarch was also planning some sort of zombie game mode this early into the zombie cycle, which I think would have been super cool to see. Also, as you may know, I for some reason really enjoy seeing placeholder or temp textures. Why though? I really don't know, but I've always found them interesting. It kinda ties into the temp textures, but I also love seeing the default vehicle. This is actually one of the few CODs where you can actually drive the default vehicle. I also think this Call of Duty's default actor is the most unique. Pretty much every Call of Duty after this has a simple blocky default actor. Jumping back 2 episodes, we have The Simpsons Road Rage, which was actually my first fan suggestion. The main thing I found interesting was the sheer amount of cut characters. I'm actually really curious what some of their vehicles would have been. I also thought this was pretty cool because it may be a remnant of when the maps were fully connected. It's just a model of a bus shelter and a sign, but again, I thought it was interesting nonetheless. Episode 18 was the first Little Big Planet, and honestly, there was tons of stuff that I thought was cool, but I'm going to start with the texture of Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I thought was a super strange placeholder texture. The Ghostbusters stickers I thought were cool because I actually reused them in my Ghostbusters episode as visual indicators. My favorite costume that was cut had to be the outfit for Parappa the Rappa. I definitely would have bought that if that came out. Lastly, Media Molecule showed off a very early version of Little Big Planet in one of their anniversary live streams, and I thought this was super cool because it gave us a great look into what Little Big Planet was before it became what we all know and love. This next one I may have to go through a bit faster because I loved a lot of the things that were cut from Fallout 3. Starting with all of this unused graffiti. A lot of these designs I just thought were super cool and would have added a lot of personality to the wasteland. Clancy would have been the only uniquely named Centurion, and it's a shame that he got cut, but he most likely would have been tied to an encounter. I also thought the Rock Crick Hunters were pretty interesting because they had a whole area dedicated to them that was also cut. I love this snowman helmet just because it's so mysterious. Like, was Bethesda thinking about a full snowman outfit? So far in this series, this map here is my favorite test map. I haven't seen any other test map have a cool developer-made structure like this. This test map here honestly blew my mind when I first loaded into it. The developer of this room made a giant pool table that I believe was used to test the following mechanic of the drones. Honestly, a very interesting way to test that. My favorite cut weapons are the spanner and the lightning gun. The spanner is just a simple wrench, but I think it would have been really cool just to run around the waist smacking people with a big wrench. The lightning gun I find more interesting. It's clearly unfinished, but a very cool concept. The final weapon I really like was never meant to be given to the player, but it's way too fun not to mention. It's Liberty Prime's nuke. These are just super fun to mess around with. Episode 31 was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and again, I like early maps, so those were my favorite things cut from this game. This last map was actually found in the data of Call of Duty Phantom, and it seems to be a hub area that was supposed to be featured in Modern Warfare 3. There's really not much to say about it, but it's still very cool seeing early maps for COD. Left 4 Dead 2, which was episode 8, is my most viewed video so far, which is pretty cool by itself, but my favorite weapon that was cut is the didgeridoo. I believe this was going to be an Australian exclusive had it been completed. This curling map I've always thought was interesting because I have no idea what it was used for other than some guesses like testing physics. I think the first person hunter pounce animation would have been very cool to see had it been fully complete. I also find it interesting because the steps to get it to work is very weird. Finally, I absolutely love the beta designs of all of the survivors, and Rochelle's hair in the beta is 1,000 times better than in the final game. In episode 20, which was the Ghostbusters game, I really liked the designs of the floats and the parade ghosts from the cut parade level. They all look very cool and would have been very cool to see in game. The other things I thought were interesting were the early cutscenes because you don't normally get to see them in this state of development, so it's always interesting to me. In episode 16, which was Postal 2, I only really had 2 things I thought was cool. The first one I just thought was pretty funny because I'm from Canada, and the second one is the fact that the revolver's bullets are completely untextured. You normally can't see this because the reload animation goes unused, but again, this is so cool. In the Fortnite episode, which was episode 7, my favorite things are the developer weapons. The first is a gnome gun, which obviously fires gnomes, the test god gun, which just decimates things, and this homing rocket trap, which still goes unused to this day. This small test map I also thought was pretty interesting because you don't normally see these types of things from Epic Games. In Grand Theft Auto 3, which was episode 25, there's a few things I found pretty interesting. Starting with this face, it's believed it's supposed to be Rockstar's version of the Statue of Liberty's face. It just looks super creepy though. All of the first-person animations I also think are super cool. To think Rockstar wanted first-person in GTA 3 all the way back in 2001 is just crazy to me. I also like the original 2 designs of the Infernus much more than the final games, but again, I'm sure it needed to be changed because of copyright issues. Just like the default actor in COD, I think the low poly guy model is pretty interesting. In episode 23, which was Black Ops 2, I mainly thought the weapons in the earlier build were the most interesting. A lot of these got completely changed for the final game, and some of these were reworked into weapons for later CODs. Also in the same early build, the Swarm Killstreak was called Switchblade, which I think is a much cooler name for that. Like I said earlier, I love a lot of early maps, and Black Ops 2 doesn't have a lot that was super early looking, but they have a lot of interesting stuff placed around them. And finally, a build with the meat game mode was leaked after I made this episode, so I made a separate video showcasing it. It was actually super cool playing this. For the longest time, the zombies community never really knew if this game mode existed. All we had were pieces of it. I didn't have too many favorites from the Benny and the Ink Machine episode, as it was pretty short, but I can easily say this was my favorite. A strange glitchy version of Boris that can only be found in the files of the mobile port. Episode 3 was the Simpsons game, and I was quite surprised at the amount of unused content in this game. The first thing that I thought that was interesting is there's a fully modeled interior of Wayland Smiller's apartment. Next, I was quite surprised that a lot of Simpsons references from various episodes were cut from the final game, like the Power Sauce bar advertisement and the cheap 99-cent stores. I also found it extremely cool that there's a lot of temp cutscenes still left over in the game's files that actually use temp voice actors. Something like this is pretty much never seen outside of the development studio, especially when it comes to a big IP like The Simpsons. Lastly, just like early maps, I love me some debug and test rooms. This one from the Simpsons game is actually pretty basic, but again, it's still very cool to see these things. From one movie game to another, it's the SpongeBob SquarePants movie game, which was episode 28 of what was cut. I found it pretty interesting that the ending area is almost identical to the same area from Battle for Bikini Bottom. I also loved how most of the levels are super easy to get out of. My favorite being in the level Dennis Strikes Back because of how easy it is. Lastly, there's a big brown square near the beginning of the level No Cheese. I have absolutely no clue what it's used for. That's why I find it pretty interesting. Episode 10 was the first racing game episode, which was Need for Speed Underground 2. I absolutely love customization, so the fact that cab neon and hood decals were cut sucks. I mean, both of these features still fully work in-game and just need to be re-enabled, so I'm really not sure why they cut them. The original map design I find super interesting. I would have loved to see this version in the final game. It's interesting to note that the whole section up here is labeled as Desert Drive, with another section labeled as Dunes. Perhaps this was the true purpose for the inclusion of the SUVs. Lastly, there's colored fog that I somehow activated by falling through this building. I personally think this would have been a very nice addition to the districts. Continuing with the only other racing game I've covered so far, which was Need for Speed Pro Street. I didn't have too many favorites from this game, but I think all of the cut maps are pretty cool, and I always find those interesting. Up next is The Warriors, which was episode 5. I mainly thought this graveyard area was interesting because it was clearly removed late in development, but it also had a lot of work put into it. I also thought this version of Sully was pretty weird. Why he's all in green is a mystery. Episode 6 was COD 4, and once again a lot of my favorites were the cut maps and test maps. This first one is a cut mission called Cobra Pilot, and it seems like it would have been pretty fun. This random test map has a pretty obscure reference in it. A vehicle damage test map, dog AI test map, and this animated version of the title screen. I don't really know why, but I just find all of these super cool. Lastly, a strange weapon that shoots cinder blocks. I have no idea what the developers were testing with this. The Jackass game, which was episode 24, mainly had a lot of voice lines, but my favorite thing or things that were cut were Wee Man's costumes. Wee Man was supposed to be a playable character, so they made a bunch of goofy outfits for him, which I think are great. The carrot is my favorite by far. In episode 32, which was the original Left 4 Dead, I loved a lot of the original smoker designs, with the middle one being my favorite. This cut survivor map is also super cool. I really wish it was finished and put into the game. It honestly reminds me of the final chapter of Dead Center from the second game. Lastly, the cut campaign called Damn It has to be some of the coolest cut content I've come across, both because it's in a super early state and because I'm a huge fan of Left 4 Dead in general. I really wish this was completed so we could have seen what the developer's true idea was with this map, but just having this remnant is just amazing as well. Episode 27 was Little Big Planet 2, and I think the early storyline and visuals were my favorite. Hearing the developers have fun with their lines and just joking around was generally really wholesome. The clips are pretty long, so I'm not going to show them fully here. I also think this was the best cut clothing item. Like, why would they remove this controller? It actually looks really good in Sackboy's hand. Episode 11 was Toy Story 2, and I found it pretty strange that Rex was a late addition to the game. Like, he's completely non-existent in the beta build. Of course, my final two favorites are maps. The first being a very early version of the construction yard. A lot is different than the final game, and the other is this strange area. It's not really known what this was used for, but it's completely different than anything else we see in the final game, so I thought it was really cool. Episode 14 was Battle for Bikini Bottom, and obviously my favorite thing that was cut was the Muscle Bob boss fight. This would have been such a cool boss and a great reference to the show. I also think the unique versions of the teleportation boxes made for the kelp forest are super cool, and I have no idea why they didn't use them. I also really like the original design of the wooden tikis. Finally, I found it super strange that almost all of the dev triggers for each boss fight were still left in the game. These are usually removed before the final build is shipped. In Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which was episode 17, there's a few things I found quite interesting. The first, of course, being the default vehicle, which I just love seeing. In this COD, it seems to be a very crude tank. Same with the default actor, he's always interesting to see because he's actually a bit different in this COD. These placeholder objects are the most unique and colorful placeholder objects I've ever seen doing this series. And I found it pretty funny yet strange that the spotlights are M240s. You know what's super cursed? Dual default weapons. Like, what? Lastly, the cut ending is super cool and interesting. You've probably already seen it, but a lot of unused voice lines are heard here, and it's super cool seeing the devs' early plans for the ending. In episode 9, which was The Simpsons skateboarding, the most interesting thing to me was this huge untextured area that's completely solid and skatable. It was actually changed in the final game to not have collision. Lastly, I thought this texture inside of the school's entrance was pretty interesting, because it's a unique texture that only appears here. Episode 26 was Pac-Man World 2, and right off the bat, my favorite cut thing was Pac-Man being able to throw punches. Another being this gator enemy, which I prefer way over the beetle. Finally, I thought this fishing pole was pretty interesting because it may hint at an earlier design of the title screen, where Pac-Man would be sitting on the dock and using this fishing rod. In Manhunt 2, which was episode 21, I found the puppet named Frisbee super interesting because he wasn't really seen. The only information we have is from the developers stating Frisbee was seen in a lot of beta builds, which means he was most likely used as a placeholder, but other people believe he was heavily involved with the story. Lastly, I really like the beta design of the Bloodhounds gang. They just look way better than the final. Moving right on to the first Manhunt, I thought these weird dolls were the most interesting because nobody really knows what they were used for. They can only be found on the mall level of the beta build, and unfortunately, the scripting for the dolls is broken, so we may never know what the true purpose is. While I pretty much know what it was used for, I still thought this div cube with some models and some props on it was very interesting. Just because it's not really that far outside of the map. Usually stuff like this is stored much further away. Finally, there's a completely unused level called Pain Factory. I thought this was super cool because there's really nothing similar to this level in Manhunt. There's also code left over for a sewer level, which Pain Factory connects to. In episode 33, which was GTA Vice City, my favorite thing right off the bat is the original design of the Infernus. I see why it needed to be changed, but come on, that design is just so much better than the final. The Coast Guard Maverick I also think is super interesting because all that's left of it is handling data in this screenshot, which may or may not actually be the Coast Guard Maverick. This may even be an earlier version of the police helicopter, I actually don't know. My last favorite thing is the Ghost Tower, mainly because it's so mysterious. I wonder if we'll ever get a build with that tower still intact. Once again, in the first Call of Duty Black Ops, which was episode 12, I was mainly interested in the early maps. I don't know what it is, I just love seeing early maps, it's so cool. The default actor in this COD is a simple blocky guy. It's very interesting that the developers periodically change this model, even though it's just a test model. Lastly, the Zombies map, Call of the Dead, has a strange dev block far outside of the map. A lot of theories were made about this block, but we still don't really know its true purposes. Episode 13 was the original Dead Rising, and right off the bat, this guy is very interesting to me, solely because of the marking on his head. He was obviously someone important, and probably tied to the story in some sort of way. I also really like Jesse's original zombie model a lot better. It just looks a lot more detailed in the final games. Finally, as you know, I love early maps, and the ones in Dead Rising are awesome. All of this temp coloring just makes the map look so much cooler. And finally, we come to episode 15, which was Grand Theft Auto 4. And honestly, my favorite thing that was cut were the voice lines of the various characters playing video games. Here are some of my all-time favorites.
Sure, we do gaming. I will come to get you in the next hour. Roman, you'll need to play a single-player game. I cannot hang out. I think I just got the high score. There you go. High score. Oh, man. I'm not so good at this. You think you're a gamer, do you?
I'm bored of video games for now, man. It's all you want to do. Another time. I'm trying to get my life together and shit, and all you ever want to do is fucking video games? Another time, Nico, another time.
I warn you, man. I always had the gift when it come to video games. Just to be clear,
I'm good at these games, man. Always was. Games always make me forget, man. I love that shit.
How the fuck did you get so lucky? I think that must be a bug. Who made this crappy game anyway? This game is crap, bro. Let's be real for a minute. This game is shit. Love this. I just wish the game had more tits. This is fun. All this game needs is bitches.
I don't know what kind of freaks made this game, but I love them all. Oh, well, we both always knew you sucked. Unlucky, dickhead. You're not very good at that. Stick to shooting people, cousin. Well played. You always were good with a joystick. Okay, bitch, time to get schooled. I've had enough of this. What is wrong with this game? This game was made by idiots. Oh, what kind of idiots would make a game like this? This game was made by sick weirdos. It's shit.
Gaming, eh? Is a good idea, but I would rather screw hot bitches. Sorry.
This game is fucking boring.
Lastly, I thought the test maps were super interesting, mainly because Rockstar usually doesn't leave their test maps in their games, so I thought it was really cool seeing this. And that's it. You've made it to the end, and a whole year has gone by. That's crazy. Thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, and generally enjoying unused stuff like I do. Without you guys, none of this would be possible, and your support is what gives me the motivation to keep making these videos. Without getting into too many details, I do struggle with a few mental health issues, and sometimes I just find it really hard finding purpose in making these videos. But I truly mean it when I say thank you. And I hope you'll join me for another great year of What Was Cut.